Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight, we settle into a story about a town that doesn't exist on any map. There are places in the world that feel as though they were not discovered so much as remembered. You turn down a road you have never driven before, and something in you loosens, as though a knot you forgot was there as quietly come undone. That is how it was for Iris. She had been driving for nearly 2 hours, looking for a farmhouse her phone's navigation kept rerouting her away from, when she found the turnoff. It was not marked, just a gap in the hedge, a lane of pressed gravel that curved gently to the left and disappeared behind a row of old linden trees. Something about it felt deliberate, intentional, as though it had been waiting. She turned. The lane opened after half a kilometer onto a village square. Cobblestones, a fountain at the center, old stone, dry, a bird sitting at its rim, a row of narrow houses with window boxes and pale curtains, a café with wooden chairs outside, a few of them occupied, a church at the far end of the square, its tower the color of old cream in the afternoon light. It was beautiful. Entirely, quietly beautiful. Iris parked at the edge of the square and sat for a moment with the engine off, listening. She could hear the bird at the fountain. She could hear the low murmur of conversation from the café. She could hear faintly the sound of a market being packed away, the folding of trestles, the soft thud of wooden crates. She got out of the car and walked across the cobblestones. The woman at the café counter smiled when Iris came in. The coffee was excellent, dark and unhurried, served with a small square of dark chocolate on the saucer. The man at the table nearest the window nodded at Iris in the easy way of someone who is simply glad to share a room with another person. A boy of about 10 swept the step outside with a birch broom, unhurried, perfectly content. She stayed for an hour, then 2. When she finally looked up, it was evening. The square had gone golden. The linden trees were catching the last of the light, and Iris sat very still in her wooden chair and thought, I would like to come back here. She did. 3 times in the next month. On the 4th visit, she asked at the hotel if they knew of any houses to rent. The woman at the desk, her name was Else, and she had the manner of someone who had never been in a hurry in her life, wrote a name and a number on the back of a receipt, without even pausing to think, as though she had been expecting the question. Iris signed the rental agreement on a Tuesday. She moved in the following Saturday. The house was on a lane behind the church. Stone floors, low ceilings, a kitchen window that looked out onto a small walled garden. The kind of house that keeps warmth well and releases it slowly, like a held breath. Iris unpacked her boxes and put her books on the shelves and made coffee and stood in the kitchen doorway, looking out at the garden. And she felt, quite simply, at home. She had not felt at home anywhere in a very long time. In those first weeks, she learned the rhythms of the town. The market was on Wednesdays. Vegetables, bread, a stall with handmade candles that smelled of beeswax and dried lavender. The baker opened at 7 and was sold out of the dark sourdough by 7:30. The church bell rang on the quarter hour, and after a few days Iris stopped hearing it, the way you stop hearing the sound of your own breathing. The people were warm, unhurried. They asked after her. Had she slept well? Had she found the good butcher on the side street? Had she noticed the light on the church tower at dusk? They brought things to her door without being asked. A jar of honey, a paper bag of walnuts, a small pot of something slow cooked that needed only to be warmed. She thanked them, and they waved her thanks away, as though it were smoke. It was a good life, a quiet life, the kind of life Iris had been trying to find without quite knowing she was looking for it. The first odd thing she noticed, she almost didn't notice at all. She had been in the town for about 3 weeks when she tried to find it on a map. Not for any particular reason. She had simply wanted to tell her sister where she was living. And her sister had asked for a postcode. And Iris had realized she didn't know it. She opened her phone. She opened the mapping application. She typed the name of the town. Nothing came back. She tried different spellings. She tried searching the name of the region, and then scrolling through the map, looking for something that matched the shape of the square, the curve of the lane. She tried the name of the nearest, larger town she was aware of. 12 kilometers east, she thought, though she had never driven there, and worked outward from it in widening circles. Nothing. She closed the app. She told herself she had misspelled. She told herself that small villages sometimes had naming variations that didn't map correctly. She told herself a great many sensible things, and made herself another coffee, and looked out at the walled garden, where the light was doing something very gentle to the leaves. And after a while, she felt better. She mentioned it to Els the next morning, at the hotel, where she often stopped for a coffee on her way to the market. "We don't tend to appear on those," Els said, refilling Iris's cup with the unhurried ease she brought to everything. "The maps, I mean. They update themselves on such odd schedules. I wouldn't worry about it." She smiled when she said it. The smile of a woman who has never found anything worth worrying about. Iris nodded. She didn't worry about it. Not then. She called her sister that evening. She described the square and the fountain and the baker who sold out of sourdough by 8:30, and the jar of honey someone had left on her doorstep. Her sister laughed and said it sounded like a film set, and Iris laughed too, and it all felt fine. Her sister said she would come to visit, 3rd week of October. She would drive down on the Friday and stay the weekend. "I'll send you directions," Iris said. But when she sat down to write the directions, she found she couldn't. She knew the turnoff, the gap in the hedge, the lane of pressed gravel, the linden trees. She knew it the way you know a smell, instinctively, without translation. But she couldn't reduce it to left and right and road numbers. She couldn't find the hedge on any map to give it a coordinate. She wrote her best attempt and sent it and told herself it would be fine. The 3rd week of October came. On the Friday afternoon, Iris stood at her kitchen window and watched the walled garden go gray as the sky clouded over. She made soup. She put clean sheets on the spare bed. She set 2 glasses on the kitchen table and opened a bottle of wine to breathe. At 5 o'clock, her sister texted, "On the road. Should be with you by 7. At 7:30, another text. "I think I've gone wrong somewhere. Can you call?" Iris called. Her sister's voice was light, unbothered, She was not someone who got easily flustered. She had followed Iris's directions to the letter, she said. She had found the right road. She had looked for the gap in the hedge and the linden trees. She had driven the road 3 times and found nothing. Just the hedge. Just the road continuing past. Iris stood in her kitchen with the phone pressed to her ear and looked out at the square beyond her lane. The fountain, the cobblestones, the café with its warm-lit windows, the church tower going dark against the evening sky. She described the turnoff again, the exact distance from the junction, the slight curl of the hedge where the gap was. Her sister listened carefully and said she would try once more. Iris waited by the window. At 8:15, her sister texted again. "I'm sorry. I can't find it. I'm going to head home. Let's plan again soon. Love you." Iris set her phone down on the kitchen table. She stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the main road beyond the town. The road her sister had driven up and down 3 times. It was dark now, and she could see the sweep of headlights when a car passed. But the cars were few, and they did not slow, and none of them turned. None of them could find the gap. She poured herself a glass of the wine she had opened, and sat at the table and sat with the feeling that was growing somewhere beneath her sternum. It was not quite fear. It was something more like the moment you realize you have been reading a sentence for some time and have not understood a single word of it. The next morning, she walked to the hotel. Else was behind the counter, as always, her hands busy with something Iris couldn't see, her face calm and open. "My sister couldn't find the town," Iris said, without quite meaning to say it so plainly. Else looked up. Her expression did not change in any dramatic way. She simply looked at Iris with the particular attention of someone choosing their words, not because the truth is complicated, but because they're deciding how much of it to offer. "Some people can't find us," she said at last. "We've always been that way. It's not something that can be helped." Iris looked at her. "How long has the town been here?" she asked. Else tilted her head, in the manner of someone consulting an internal document that is very long. "A very long time," she said. "Longer than the roads. Longer than the maps. We were here before people started writing things down, I think. Or at least, before they started writing us down." She said it without pride or apology. The way you might describe the color of a stone. Iris walked home through the square. The market was being set up. The trestle tables, the paper bags, the stall with the beeswax candles. The baker was pulling the shutters open. The bird was at the fountain again, or perhaps a different bird. It was hard to say. Everything was exactly as it always was. She sat in her kitchen and looked at her phone. She tried once more to find the town on the map. She scrolled slowly, methodically, across the fold of landscape where she knew the town to be. The map showed roads and fields and a river, and, here and there, the names of other villages. Her town was not among them. The space where it should have been was simply blank, not absent exactly, just unwritten. She made coffee. She looked out at the walled garden. A sparrow landed on the garden wall, sat for a moment, and flew away. She thought about her sister, driving up and down that road in the dark. She thought about the gap in the hedge that her sister couldn't find. and she thought about how she herself had found it so easily. That first afternoon, without looking for it at all. She had simply turned. Something had simply let her in. She wasn't sure anymore what that meant. She stayed in the kitchen for a long time. The church bell rang the quarter hour, and the half, and the hour. She stopped counting. Outside, the market went on. Voices passed in the lane. Someone laughed. A low, unhurried laugh. The kind that comes from being untroubled. She thought about leaving. She sat with the thought, turned it over, the way you turn a stone to see what's underneath. If she drove out tomorrow, she would find the main road. She was sure of that. She had driven in and out a dozen times without difficulty. The town did not keep her. It was simply selective about who it showed itself to. She thought about that word, selective. She thought about the first afternoon, the way the lane had appeared, the way the town had felt like a memory rather than a discovery, the way Els had written the landlord's name without pausing, as though the question had been expected. Perhaps it had been. Perhaps the town had not been waiting for anyone in particular. Perhaps it simply waited, in the general way of things that know something others don't, for the people who would notice the gap in the hedge, the people who would turn without needing to know why. She did not find this comforting, exactly, but she did not find it frightening either. That evening, she sat in the walled garden until the light was gone. The air smelled of damp stone and something faintly sweet. The linden trees or the beeswax candles from the market stall, she couldn't tell. The church bell rang the hour. Somewhere in the square, someone set down a crate, and the sound carried cleanly through the still air and faded. She was thinking about the map, the blank space where the town should have been. Not absent, unwritten. There was a difference, she thought. To be absent from something was to have failed to appear. To be unwritten was something else, something older. It meant you existed before the writing. It meant the writing had come along and simply moved around you, left you in the white space at the edge of things. Not because you weren't real, because you were something the map makers didn't have language for, or because you had decided very long ago not to be written down. Iris sat in the garden and thought about that decision. She thought about who had made it, and when, and what they had known or feared or hoped. She thought about all the people who had ever lived here, in this fold of Belgian countryside, in houses with stone floors and low ceilings and kitchen windows that looked out onto small walled gardens. She thought about whether they had known the way she now knew, whether it had unsettled them the way it unsettled her, or whether they had simply accepted it, made their coffee, looked at their gardens, let the church bell count the hours. She thought, I could ask Els, but she thought Els had already told her everything Els was going to tell her, and perhaps that was enough. Perhaps some knowledge arrived in the right increments, like light through a window that faces the wrong direction. Slow, indirect, sufficient. She went inside. She washed her cup. She turned off the kitchen light. And in the square outside, the fountain sat quiet in the dark. The cobblestones held the cold, and the linden trees stood at the edge of the lane, patient as they had always been, their roots deep in soil that did not appear on any map. The town breathed. The town waited. Iris slept. Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles, where even the quietest places can hold the oldest secrets. If this stillness stayed with you, if the cobblestones and the linden trees settled somewhere behind your eyes, then let them remain a little while longer. Some places, after all, were never meant to be found. And yet here you are. Rest now. The town knows you're here.